You're listening to the Not Just Numbers podcast, a conversation with mathematicians on their work and their lives to get to know them and discuss common biases and misconceptions.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the 9th episode of the podcast It's Not Just Numbers, in which we try to debunk common stereotypes surrounding mathematicians. Today I'm joined by Marcello Seri.
Hi.
And two guests named Josselin Kooij.
Hi.
And a familiar voice by the name Marit van Straaten, who was the co-host last year.
Hello.
They are both ex-mathematics students that are currently working in industry. And today we will ask questions about their experiences of working there. But first we try to get to know our guests a little better. So my first question would be to Josselin, because with you I'm not sure what you're working or doing in industry. What are you doing? And could you explain it in a way that I understand?
So I'm an actuary, which is someone who works in finance. So I work for a big insurer, and I actually report quarterly and yearly numbers in finance, where I make models, mathematical models, that actually try to see what kind of damages we get or claims where people have damage. That's mostly what I do. And then we try to optimize some things that we try to report.
And this then would be heavily linked to statistics, I guess?
Yeah, so most of the actuarial field is highly linked to statistics. Yeah.
What kind of predictions or what kind of factors do you consider when you make these predictions?
So usually we have different products, and for each product you have a different type of runoff. So for example, if you have just a hit from your car against a pole, that wouldn't take really long to solve. So someone claims the damage, we give you some money and you fix it, right? That's easy. But if you have some personal damage, maybe you have to go to a hospital, maybe it takes really long to recover, or maybe you're not able to work fully after that, then it's a really long progress to actually claim all the damages that have occurred. So that's a big factor in how we estimate how long a damage will run before it's closed.
So it's not about the occurrence, but rather the costs of certain events happening.
Yes, the chances of them happening. And we only have mostly historical data. So using that, we predict whether a lot of claims happen and how much money they are going to cost and how long that's going to take us to close them.
Interesting. May I ask you something about the type of mathematics involved? I know a bit about mathematical modeling, but very little about statistics. But I'm familiar that there are prediction models, if you wish, some that use Bayesian method or similar methods to make prediction based on historical data. And there are also other models that try to make prediction by simulating the dynamics of these random processes. So instead of having a ball moving in space and try to understand how it moves, they create random processes that jump around in space by following specific law, something like stochastic differential equations and their solutions. Is this the type of models that you use, one or the other, or it has nothing to do with it?
Well, the models we use are pretty static, I believe. So I haven't dived into them really in detail because they are set like one time per year and then they're only used for the rest of the year. So it's not like we change model that often because, well, you want to have something that's reliable and you don't want too much changes in your model because then your data is changing as well or your expectation is changing. So I'm not that read into what the models exactly use, but I think they're quite static and it's more like I wouldn't say a simple formula, but it's quite a simple use of a model. So it's not like a stochastic model.
Thanks.
How about you, Marit? What are you doing currently?
So, well, as you said, I've graduated last summer, and since September, I've started to work at NS, which is the Dutch railway company. And I've started in the role of an IT trainee. And so that is a 2-year program where each year I have a certain position or I have a certain project that I'm working on. And for the first year, so for more than like almost the last 10 months, I've been working on the implementation of an IT application that we're making with the team. And it's an application that's, how do you say it? Replaces the old system for the people who plan the shifts for the people working in NS. So you can maybe imagine in a train company, there are a lot of people that don't work 9-to-5 jobs. Like about 10,000 people working at NS have jobs that require working in shifts. So for like a very easy example would be the train drivers or the conductors. Because we don't use the train only from 9 to 5. Like you also need the train driving from 6 in the morning and maybe 11 at night. And the program that is currently in use, it's not as future-proof anymore as we want it to be. So hence we are replacing it with a new program. And I've been helping with the implementation of it. So I have had a lot of contact with our users. What do they want to see in the program? How do they use it? Is the program as it is right now sufficient for them to do their jobs? But also do like part of the managing for, how do we actually implement it? When do people get their education? When will we go live? How do we do the whole process towards the going live moment? So it's not that mathematical, I would say.
Well,
but
planning is pretty mathematical.
Yeah, definitely. Like in the thing itself, like it uses a lot of logic. Like mostly the thing that I'm using now in my work is logic. That you can quickly understand how such an application works and the behind the scenes logic that is implemented in such a program. But mostly I have to communicate a lot. I call a lot with people. I'm in a lot of meetings. I go to people a lot. So that is the thing that I'm currently doing. And for next year, I have another project that I'm working on that's going to be a little bit more mathematical. I'm going to be working in a team that builds a solver. So like they build algorithms and they then implement them in a way that is viable to have a solution within usable time, so to say. Because I think we all know that you can build certain models or certain very theoretical ideas, but in the end, you want them to be able to give a satisfactory answer, which is maybe not 100% correct, but kind of gives an indication of whether something will be useful or will happen. So that is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. So that is what I'm currently doing, at least. Yeah. I hope that gives a little bit of a view. I don't know if it's clear or not. If not, please ask.
Yes, I think, and we've plenty opportunity to ask. So in the first half of the episode, we try to get to know you a bit. And so I'm also interested in the journey it took you to get to this job you're doing. I mean, it's not ended, hopefully, but I'm interested in that too. And so Josselin, what did it look like for you studying mathematics and then up until finding this job that you're working in now?
Well, it was quite a long road to get here. When I was studying mathematics, I already started teaching. So during my master's, I was already teaching at a high school, and I did that for 2 years. So 1 year I only did it for the study. So you have to do like an internship and things like that. And then a year after, I also had my own classes next to that. But I also did the master's in education. So I am also teaching by diploma. So I could continue that, but I didn't, mostly because, well, I did like teaching students mathematics, but there was a lot of work around teaching. So, of course, you have to prep your classes and you have to look at tests and things like that. I didn't mind that, but there's a lot of administration and things that go around the teaching aspect that I didn't like. So, and also the learning curve is really steep if you're not like really into teaching and having those children in your classes, then it's a lot of effort to become a good teacher. So they say to become a good teacher, it takes you like 5 to 10 years. And I didn't really want to put in 5 to 10 years to become a good teacher. So I decided to try something else, and I wasn't really sure what. But I knew someone that also studied with us that did a traineeship for an actuary. And I decided that I wanted to do that as well. So I also started with a traineeship. It was not an IT traineeship like Marit is doing, but it's for actuary specific. So within the traineeship, it was actually just data sharing. It's work on project base where you get sent to different companies. I did that for, I think, 3 years. And I saw a lot of different companies in that time, like Aegon. I worked at Rabobank, some smaller companies where I did some smaller projects, and they were very varying. So one time I would just pick up the phone and tell someone about life insurance. And another time I would make a proposal to get a mortgage from a bank. And that was all really easy and simple. That's not really something you would give to a mathematician. But it was part of the traineeship to get like knowledge on insurance and banking products. So that really helped. And during that time, I also got the opportunity to do like training. So I did a rekenaars course, which is like a beginning of actuarial rekenaar, which is like a propedeutic level of knowledge about the actuarial field. And after that, I did a pre-master and a master in actuarial science. So those were both part-time. So in my
Yes, I
next
was
to
going
my
to
job.
ask. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, because I couldn't do that full time. So it was part time. It was, I believe, the pre master was like 1 or 2 evenings a week, and then the master was a day a week. And then for a few years. So I'm really glad that's behind me. It was a lot of work.
But sorry, so how does it work? Did you start, how did you find the traineeship? You do it with a company or with the company that you are already working with, or it's some external additional school?
Yeah, so I was working with this traineeship, which was like the company I was actually employed at, and they would provide me with the money to study these things. You would have to give a motivation, and there were like things in place that if you leave the company at some time, you had to pay back part or the whole study fee. But they actually encouraged me to do it, mostly also because, well, they would set you on projects, and the more knowledge you have, the better projects they are going to give you. So it's a bit of a give and take on whether, well, if I'm better, then they can make more money from me if I don't do such a study next to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
But that's nice
eventually,
because they enable you, right, in this way. So you
yes.
grow into the job and they can reap the benefits later. So it's nice
Yeah,
that.
so that's also a big part of a traineeship mostly. That's also why I started it, because they had this promise of you will become an actuary while you're doing this program. Yeah, so that really helped. And then eventually I got like more projects that were actually more actuarial, but that took quite some time. So I wasn't that happy with how much time it took for them to find me great projects. Eventually, I became a pricing actuary at Interpolis, which was unfortunately in Tilburg, which is a long way away from where I was living at the time. So I decided to leave that company and to find something more close by, also as a pricing actuary. And that was really cool because as a pricing actuary, you actually determine the price of insurance.
Mm.
So for maybe, I don't know, maybe you have a car, I don't know, you have a home, and if you have like insurance for your stuff in your home or your car, then I was actually determining how much you had to pay for that insurance. So that was really cool to do, but it was also quite simple, and the mathematics behind it was quite simple. So the models were quite simple. And there's not a lot of rules you have to apply to it. After a year or two, I was a bit bored of the subject, so I decided to become the reporting actuary that I am now within the same company.
Right. Yeah.
So that's
It's
how
funny
I
that
got here.
I think it's because I think you're a bit further in like the number of years you've worked in
Mhm.
comparison to me. But I do think that it's nice to note that once you were like, okay, this is not what I want to do, I will just go find what I do want to do. Like you were like, okay, Tilburg, that's too far for me, but I do want to do this job. So I'll just try to find something, that suits me better. Because that's also something that I'm like, I don't know what the future holds for me. Maybe at some point I'll do a job that I'm not really enthusiastic about, or I become less engaged with time. I think that's an important lesson for me to keep in mind.
Well, you're kind of taking over already, because I was going to turn to you to ask you whether you could lay out the path.
Yeah, of course. So for me, it was a little bit more recent. So I don't have that much experience as Josselin to tell how I ended up here. So last year, I think a little bit more than a year ago, I was like, okay, I'm doing my master thesis. It looks like I passed all my courses. So if this thesis goes well, I'm set to graduate this summer. And then what do I want to do next? And just like Josselin, I was very intrigued by the idea of doing a traineeship, because you get some more room within a company to explore a little bit what you like and what you want to do, and to get more support getting to where you want to be. So I decided to apply for a few traineeships. I already knew that I wanted to work in either the public sector or the semi-public sector, because of my personal beliefs that I think motivate me to work well, that I feel like that I'm contributing to society in a way that's is meaningful to me. So that's why I decided to react to these kinds of job offers. And I don't know, I felt pretty insecure, I have to say, if I'm being honest, when I started applying, because I was like, okay, I did a very theoretical mathematics master. It is applicable in the very niche parts of industry, I think, but not very broadly easy to advertise with it. Like if you had done AI, I think every company now and then was like, AI, that is so cool and very nice. So it's different. So I felt a bit insecure. Also, like, okay, am I good enough? I've been studying for a couple of years. Will companies like me? Will I get even an interview? But it actually went okay, I would say. I had a few interviews, and I already pretty early on knew that my preferred choice would be the NS, so the place that I'm working in now. It was quite an extensive application process, I would say, but nonetheless, I don't know, I managed to get through and to convince them that I'm a good choice for this job, and that I have the potential that they're looking for. At the last part of the application process, I could say, okay, they had a lot, some options for projects that you could choose from, and they would tell you, okay, please rank 1, 2, 3, what your preferred choice would be, which I like, because, you're gonna work on the project for a year, which does not seem like a long time, maybe a year, but if you're working for a year on a project that you don't like, I think we all know that then time goes very slowly and it's hard to keep motivating yourself. So I was glad that was possible, and I put the option that I'm working on now at number 1, because I thought it was a good way to see the company, to actually work with the operation also. I think within IT and also within NS, it is very easy to be pulled away from what we're really doing, which is driving trains. And I thought it was very important to at least learn more about how that whole process works. And I think working with the people that plan, the people who drive the trains, keeps me within touch with the focus of our company. So I'm very glad that I got to do the first choice. I think that was that was great. And then I started here. I had I'm having a good time. So I'm really glad that I got the job.
Congrats on that, because it's indeed quite recent in terms of years. I was wondering, because Josselin told her that she actually did another study in order to become what she's now. How much did you have to study or reskill yourself in the skills that you're applying now in your job?
The main skills that I'm applying now, it would be logical mathematical thinking. I have 5 years of training in that, so that's pretty good. Another big part of my job is communication. And then also both communicating with a big team that I'm working with, so with fellow colleagues. How do we keep everybody in the loop, that we are all knowing what we're doing. How do you discuss certain issues or certain problems so that we can find a solution? But also communicating to end user in this case, like if they have a problem or they have a certain feeling, or they want to, I don't know, any type of communication. That's something that I'd not really done before. Like I had worked in projects during my studies, but not in a way that's the communicating with the end user is different than working in a project, I would say, because there is a kind of this imbalance. Like they go to you because they want to have something changed in the program. Like they can't do it themselves physically, so they need you to do it. And in order to do so, you need to be able to understand really well where they're coming from, what they need, and then also discuss with the developers what are the options that can be done for this end user to help them in the program, and find like a middle road between the technical options and the wishes of the end user. And that is something that I had to, like, I didn't follow a training or something, but during the year I have grown in that communication style, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine that the hierarchy style comparing to working in projects is much more difficult or much more intricate. And by the way, I was wondering if you're talking about users or end users, what do you mean exactly?
I mean the people who are using our program. So the people, like in Dutch, they're called dienstendelers. So in English, I think that would translate to shift schedulers, I think. Yeah, so you have certain shifts, which is like maybe from 8 to 6 or 8 to 5, that is a shift. And they need to arrange that the shift gets placed with the person that is actually going to carry out that shift. So good question. So the end user here is the person who distributes the shifts among people. And it might sound to people who are maybe not familiar with the process, at least it did to me, I would say. It sounded like, oh, is this a difficult job? Does it involve so much work? And it actually does. I did not expect that, but I've learned definitely that these people, they work a lot. They have a lot to deal with, a lot of rules, a lot of restrictions. And then also maybe you're almost done with making the roster for the next week. And then somebody calls, hey, I want a day off because blah, 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 blah. And then you need to go back to the drawing table and see whether you can fix it for that person or not. So yeah, and many other stuff that I did not know before that this even happened at NS.
Yes. It's something you told me because we know each other personally too, for people listening to this podcast. And this really amazed me how you deal with this as a scheduler, is that train drivers are trained for specific trajectories.
Yes,
So
among other things.
You can't schedule them on another trajectory.
Yeah,
You
so
really have to take all of this in account.
yeah, exactly. So what a shift would look like is, okay, the train driver. So first the train drives from Amsterdam to Utrecht, and then from Utrecht to Groningen, and then from Groningen to Zwolle, and then from Zwolle to Deventer. I don't know. And then back to Amsterdam. I'm just saying something. It does not make sense. But in order for a train driver to be allowed to drive from Utrecht to Groningen, it needs to have a certain certificate that it's allowed to drive there, that it knows how the road, how the railway looks, that it knows which parts to pay attention to, and you can't so such a shift you can't just put with any person. That person needs certain certificates that it's allowed to drive the train there. And that's good because it's part of safety, right? If we're like passengers on the train, we want to be ensured that the train driver knows what to do. And this is one way of doing that. Yeah, and another example for this is also the material. So people who have driven, like who have been passengers on the train in the Netherlands, know that we have different types of trains, and every train works differently. I did not know that. It is very logical, but I never thought about it. So if you have like a certain intercity that has 2 levels, for instance, that's a different type of train than the one that only has 1 level, and you need a different certificate for it, and you need to drive it every once so often to keep the certificate, and every year you need to do a retraining, and well, like things like that. So then also if you have the route that I just explained, like you don't take the same train from Amsterdam to Utrecht to Groningen to Zwolle to Deventer. It's probably, okay, you drive this one type of train from Amsterdam to Utrecht, and then from Utrecht to Groningen it's a different one. So then if you're the person distributing the shifts, you need to be able to say, okay, this shift has this material, so then this person can take the shift, but this person cannot because they can't drive this one train, for instance.
I can imagine that if you get to know all the details, you'll be amazed that trains drive at all.
Yeah.
It will make your work next year more interesting, right? Because you will have to write this satisfiability solver that takes into account all these constraints, so it will make it much harder. But can we make a step back, a long step back, in fact? So we meaning me and Anna, know what made you study mathematics, Marit. And for all the listeners that do not, I would strongly recommend to listen to our first season. So I'm not going to let you tell it again because I want to use this as an advertisement. But we don't know what made you, Josselin, study mathematics. So can we go back there? When you were in high school, when you decided what to study, what university you would like, how come you chose mathematics? What's your relationship with the topic?
So in high school, I was really good at mathematics and I graduated with a 9.8 on my exam. So it was more of a given to go study mathematics than it was really a choice. I did hesitate on other beta subjects like architecture. I looked at chemistry as well, which chemistry I went to Eindhoven to check out the university and I went to Delft for architecture, but I actually didn't feel great at those universities at all. And when I looked at Groningen, I felt at home most. And well, the mathematics part was more, like I said, more of a given that it would be fun. So that's why I mostly started. And during the trajectory, I also did most of the hardcore mathematics, with not the statistics part, but more like I worked a lot with Jaap Top, so you will know. And eventually that became a little too hard, so I switched to the education track. But yeah, it was mostly because I was really good at it.
And was that a particular subject or something in particular in mathematics that made you want to do more, right? You were very good just naturally, or there was something that hooked you in particular?
It's just all very logical. So I like things to be, well, in order. So for the mathematics in high school, it was really easy. There's also always one solution that works, and there's one way to do it, or maybe multiple, but there's a right way to do it. And I also found that a lot in the calculus courses and the linear algebra courses. I like those a lot. And then when you make those things more abstract, I did also like them, but not as much. So maybe something in physics would have also fit, with the calculus that I like.
And how this affinity with order then changed with your change of careers? Like the moment you started going into actuarial science and went from something that is, if you wish, rigid logic to something that has this aleatory random feeling to it. Like you have to predict if something is likely or not and put numbers on top of it. And very important one, since you're the one that suggests how much people should have to pay for their insurances.
Yeah, it's all really vague. So it's not orderly at all. I mean, there's also a lot of ways you can predict. There's a lot of factors that come into place, a lot of choices you have to make for which maybe you don't have good reasoning. So yeah, that's a really different path. So that's also why in the first place I didn't really like statistics, because it's not like hardcore mathematics, or that's how I see it. But eventually, when you get to the point that you follow economics and you see, well, the world of economics and finance cannot be explained with nice structured things in mathematics, then you learn how to deal with those. And then it's actually more of a challenge to try to make it orderly, and to give some guidance in how you want the numbers to turn out, which is a good challenge for me. I like that.
Nice. And talking about challenges, when Marit was talking about this first year in which she decided to talk a lot to people and get to know the company, it sounds very much what you were saying at the beginning, where you were talking with customers and looking at offering insurances or mortgages or not, like getting in touch with the actual if you wish, sales or with the actual life of the company around the modeling instead of the modeling itself and the prediction themselves. And I saw you were nodding a lot. And I'm curious, what was your experience with communication? Like you did also education, which maybe gives you a bit more than what a master in general mathematics gives you in terms of communication, but it's also still not the focus, I guess, of the university degree that you got. So I'm curious, what was also with you this relationship with communication at first, and if our university prepared you enough for that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So yeah, I agree that the master in education communication, it really helps because, well, the communication part of that master in that time was really focused on getting information across to someone that is not really into beta studies. So that really helped. Also, teaching something to someone who's 16 or 13 years old gives a really good idea on how to communicate with people that don't know mathematics at all. So that really helped. I also think that it's part of my personality, so I don't really mind communicating at all. So during my studies, I was mostly the one presenting things and discussing things with others. So for me, it was like more of a second nature. So I didn't really mind. I didn't like it to call with customers because it's like more of a black box. You don't know who's going to be on the other side of the call. But you do learn a lot about how you communicate and things like that. And also, my traineeship gave some soft skill classes on how to communicate and how to make yourself present better to others. They also teach you in how to do an interview for a new company and things like that. So apart from all the, sorry, my dog is whining. Apart from like doing studies that were like really actuarial based, I also did soft skill classes. For example, a green belt certificate. I've also got that. That's for efficiency within companies. So it's a very broad study, well, broad subjects that I actually studied in due to that traineeship. So I'm really grateful for that because that helps in my job every day.
I can imagine. And what about you, Mari? Did the preparation you had at our university help in any way with the communication, or it was really basically, now I'm here, I have to figure it out? Because you said you didn't have specific training for it also at the company, right?
No, that's true. I think what did help with the communication is that we had to give presentations. I think that being able to present well and get a message across is super important when you're working in a company, because you can be right about stuff, but if you can't get your message across to the people around you and convince them that your idea is the best idea, then your idea will not be chosen, even though it might be the best idea. But I would say, and I don't think that that's necessarily like my studies in particular, but I would say that everything that I did besides my studies, but that's also part of university. Like I was active with the study association. I did like teaching assistant jobs. I did a promo team job. I did the podcast for a year. And then like being put in a lot of different situations where you have to communicate in a lot of different ways gives you a lot of, well, yeah, experience. And then also being able to reflect back on it and thinking like, oh, next time I think that if I had asked this question to this person, I would have understood their question better. I think things like that help me more with developing the communication skill than the courses that I followed, which I think is not a problem. The courses that you follow are for the majority there to teach you material and maybe sometimes to be able to discuss material with each other and to discuss mathematical ideas with each other. And I think that the courses manage to do that well. But then the other parts, which are, I also see like part of the university, but although they are not courses, but they were facilitated by the university, I think they helped in the other communication parts, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It makes perfect sense, and I agree that part of our job is helping you and helping also ourselves learn to communicate better, but not necessarily by giving course. Like I would never feel entitled to give a course about that. but at least facilitating the student to find the opportunities to do it themselves if that's the part that they like. So yeah, I fully agree. I feel we are getting more and more toward the job aspects here. So maybe let's take one more step back, and let me start from Josselin. So in the first part, when we get to know our guests, we also like to ask them what they do that is not mathematics. So the hobbies, or what's the non-mathematical part of their life? Because one of the big stereotypes is that mathematicians are there fully in for their mathematics. And we are all mathematicians here. I mean, labels or not, we have been trained as mathematicians. So independently of our jobs, we are. And so we are curious, what do you do in your life which is not mathematics?
Yes, and if I might add to that, has it changed when you've stopped studying and started your job?
Oh, that's a good question. During my studies, I used to ride my motorcycle and I was very creative. So I would do things with painting and drawing, and I would game a lot. Which I mostly continued until I sold my motorcycle because I was living somewhere that I couldn't store it. And then somewhere on the way, I got children. Well, one now and the second on the way. So now my time is mostly going to that. So I am sometimes able to play a game on my computer. We have a dog, so I really like walking with the dog, things like that. I'm still creative. So before we started, I was telling you about that I'm well, it's not redecorating, it's like verbouwen. I'm changing the layout of my house. So there's constructors working on the house right now. And I actually designed my new bathroom. So there's still some creative aspects that I do in my free time that are not particularly mathematic based. So that's really fun. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for me, I've been thinking like when I was a student, I liked to read a lot. So read a lot of books. I used to, also be creative. So there was a time when I would like crochet sweaters for myself. And I would also like to just to do sports. So I would often, when I was a student, I would go swimming before classes. So there's the option to go swim from 8:30 until 9:30. I would almost never make the 8:30 time, but like 7:45, which is still fine. Like it's better than nothing. And I think for me, that has like it has all changed a bit. Like I've not been crocheting that much anymore. But I also do not miss it as much as I would think. So maybe it was just a phase, and maybe in like a year or something, it will come back, and I will be like, oh, it's winter. I want to make my own sweater. I don't know. But I have taken up aquarelle painting, so maybe that is like the replacement of like the creative part that crocheting left behind. But one thing that I noted once I started doing my job, that I was really tired after working. So like in the evenings when I had worked, and maybe I would eat with friends, but I would be like, okay, I'm just really tired and I'm here and it's nice, but I will like not talk as much as you're maybe used of me. I will just go home. I will go to bed early. Especially the first few months, like having all these new impressions and finding a way to yeah, for yourself to work. It is a whole new different world and a whole new different way of holding yourself and of being, which is just totally new. And it took some time for me to be able to do more on the automatic pilot, I would say, which costs less energy. So at first, when I had to ask somebody for help, I would be like, oh, I have to approach this person and ask them a question. And oh no, do I not distract them from their work? Will they be able to help me? And then you do it once or twice, and then you're like, oh, this is not that hard. And then the next time it does not cost that much energy. But in the beginning, like everything costs a lot of energy. But I would say that after like 2 to 3 months, things calmed down a bit and I had a little bit more time. So I have again read a lot of books this year, like since September. Not as much as I did last year, but like that's okay. I do still find sometimes time for them, so that is nice. And with sports, it's also a bit less structured as I would like it to be. I am hoping to pick it up soon because I've moved very close to where I work. So that makes it very easy for me to, like, I don't have a long commute. Like, it's 10 minutes by foot, I guess. So that makes it very easy to, after work, go sporting, or like before work, go to the gym, or like walk or run. So I'm hoping to get that back up in a more disciplined manner, so to say. So yeah, the major change for me would be like the amount of energy I have left after a whole day, to make the long story short.
Does it get better, Josselin?
Yes, I remember what Marit is talking about. The
Okay.
first few months were so intense, and you would get home, you were glad you had eaten, and then you would love to go to bed because it's so exhausting, especially if you work a full-time job. So I recognize it. It does really get better, but I also, like I said, the studies was really a lot, and I decided after the studies to not work a full-time job anymore, and that also helps a lot with the amount of energy that it costs. So I haven't worked full-time for like 2 years or 3 years already.
I can imagine, especially if you have a child, that also takes a lot of energy outside of work.
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
The answers are very recognizable, I think. So thank you for the beautiful answers. And I think then we're ready for the questions that are more so targeted towards what you're doing now in your job. And the first one we've addressed, namely what you're doing as a job. And the second one would be the difference that you experience between studying and academia. You've mentioned some things already, some not so much. What is one of the major things that stood out as a difference?
For me, studying is very like individualistic. You are the person who has to do all the work, and you are the only one, well, except if you're working in a group project, but mostly for most courses, you are the person who gets a grade and then passes or fails the course. And I feel like when you're working, that's not the case. Like, of course, there's no pass or fail, but you can work your ass off and it still cannot be enough. And then it also does not mean that your colleagues are not putting in the effort, but sometimes that just happens. There's not a guarantee that if you do this, then you will get a good grade. While when you're studying, you mostly know, okay, I know all the theory, I've done all the tutorials, I've worked through extra exercises, any questions I've asked, I'm probably gonna do well on this exam. And that is a different kind of mindset, I think, when you start working. There's no one at the end to give you a grade. It's just that the work gets done or it does not. And sometimes it gets done badly. And that is what it is. Yeah, you're not fired. Or at least I was not yet.
I see you nodding, Josselin. Do you have the same experience?
Yeah, it's similar, but I also thought about it, and it's what I mostly had with studying was that it's very like on the knowledge. So knowledge of the mathematics, and you have to study subjects to really understand them. While in my job, it's not always about understanding what's the underlying mathematics. It's more about being efficient in what we do and being on time with the deadlines that we have, communicating what we have found to other stakeholders. It's like maybe 10 to 20% of the time is actually spent on the knowledge that you have on what we are doing, and the rest of the time is making it faster and doing it better and things like that.
Does this style of working suit you better?
I really like making things more efficient. So I like it. I don't mind that it's not that much on the knowledge part. I do think that in my current function, there's a lot of opportunity to learn more about like the actual mathematics part. So for me, there's a lot of trajectories I could still take within my job. That is not what I'm doing now. So that's really something I like about it. Yes.
And if you were able to say something to yourself as a student that would have helped you your transition to your current career, what would you tell yourself?
Do more statistics.
Yes. Because then you didn't have to do the other education that you did, or?
Yeah, it would have saved me a lot of time later on learning the same statistics I would have had in university. Yeah.
I
So
think
if some of our listeners still have to choose their electives, now they have a hint.
Yeah.
Marit, you?
Yeah, I think I would tell myself to, yeah, even though being at university sometimes feel like you're like in this vicious cycle that you can't get out of, like you have classes, you have homework, you have exams, you have classes, you have homework. Like it's all the same, but to allow myself to do some things outside of that, things that will give me an idea of what kind of job I would like and what kind of job I would be good at. Because I think everybody who studies mathematics is probably good at mathematics. Otherwise, you probably won't like it or you won't make the courses. But at the end, once you finish your studies and you don't want to pursue like a career in mathematics that way, I think it would be helpful to know what kind of job works for you. And that could be a job where you're just behind a screen all day and you don't really need to talk to other people. Maybe I could have tried like doing a project with myself in that way, or try to get like a little small side job besides my study doing something like that. And maybe it would tell me, oh, this is something that I really like, or it would maybe tell me, oh, I really dread those hours that I have to work by myself. So that is not the way that's like I should not find a job later on that requires that of me. I think because that is something that I'm learning now. And I think that would have helped me better to see, okay, what kind of jobs do I want to apply to? Because I had no idea. I was just like, okay, I know generally the direction I want to go in, but okay, this is a data analysis job. Sure. I don't know what it says, what it does, whether I will like it or not. So maybe something like that.
What I get from your answer that is that looking for a job that suits you maybe already starts within your studies in the type of extracurricular activities you choose, such as side jobs or hobbies even.
Yeah, definitely. So like I think finding out what job suits you starts with finding out who you are and what works for you and what motivates you. And indeed, what you're saying, it does not need to be only through study or extracurriculars, but also, yeah, maybe you have a hobby that you really like, or I don't know, you've had this one experience where you're like, whoa, I had such a fun day. Okay, what made it fun for me? So I think you're making a good point.
Yeah, and I
I
would
also
push it
think
further, even to people that want to make an academic career. It wouldn't harm knowing that, because you never know when this career could be interrupted by God knows what kind of event, lack of funding, or just life changing.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
awesome.
Josselin, I interrupted you.
that's okay. I also think that what Marit says is correct. I think also you need to know what kind of options you have. So before you even look into what would fit me, if you don't know what you can do with the mathematics skills that you gain, you wouldn't know where to look. So I actually heard that the university is starting a course, a master's course, in which you get more idea of what you can do after your mathematics studies. And I was actually one of the invited speakers not too long ago. And I think that's a really good progress in the masters to actually provide with options. Like you could go all these kinds of directions that I wouldn't even thought of when I was studying, that I would have liked to know, so I could make a more educated guess on what would have fit me. Because, well, you can try a lot of things, but if you don't know all the options, you're never gonna know which way you want to go.
I think you're making a fair point. And I would like to add to that, that imagine that you, at such an event, you're like, oh, I really want to do what Josselin does. And then it turns out that it benefits you if you take statistic courses. Or like, I'm just saying like, oh, I want to do this kind of job. Oh, this kind of skill is required. Then I can pick up this project or this hobby, or try to do this as a side hustle. I don't know. But then you can at least prepare yourself for it. Because once you're done and then you were like, okay, I've done the master's now. What do I want to do? Like, I think you're making a really good point in that. Yeah.
Did the experience of studying mathematics influence the experiences you've had in applying for jobs? So did it in any way help you that you studied mathematics? I mean, it's hard to compare it to something else because you're the only person, well, the only life you can compare it to.
I think it does help, but I don't think it's specifically mathematics. It's for a lot of applications I did, there's usually like if you did a beta study, for example, mathematics or physics or things like that, you would always be preferred over someone that studied something else. So for most of the the jobs that I applied to, that was the case. So it would have helped to have studied mathematics. I think that's mostly what I gained from it.
I agree, and my own limited experience compared to Josselin, I had to look for the second year project that I'm gonna do myself. So I started talking to people within the company, and they would ask, "Okay, what did you study?" Blah 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 blah. And when I would tell them I studied mathematics, it did seem that they were they were positive about it. They were like, "Okay, like." Being able, like getting to program algorithms or working well with algorithms, even though I didn't do a master in algorithms, it should be okay for you to, within a few months, get familiar with them. And same, I also had another option somewhere to do like a very fundamental data analyst project. And they were also like, okay, we have hired a lot of people who have done econometrics or mathematics. And we know that if you have this kind of education, you will be able to pick up quickly what we're doing and be able to give us a usable result. So I would say that in that case, particular mathematics would be more useful than, for instance, I don't know, another beta study, I think. But that are very specific examples that are very limited because it's only my experience here. But I think what Josselin says is true, that once you've done like a beta study, which requires a certain way of thinking and working, that is also what people look for.
And so this is somehow the next step, because it tells you you apply and then you have good chances of being called because they like the analytical skills that you get by this kind of degrees. But how did you go about finding the job you liked? You said you have to figure it out. You didn't have experience about that. So what was your mind and actual process to find the job you thought you liked?
Will you go first, Josselin, or?
No, you can go first.
Well, my process was, as I said, I wanted to go preferably do a traineeship, preferably in the public or semi-public sector. So I just started looking at werkenvoornederland.nl, which is the big government site that has all the available jobs for the government. And I applied to a bunch of them that were like, okay, this looks nice. It's probably what I'm interested in. I knew I wanted to do something kind of IT data analytic. And I also looked specifically at companies that was like, okay, I think this is a nice company to work at. So yeah, a bunch of companies, among others, NES. And so I looked like, okay, what kind of jobs do they have on offer? What is there? Because not all, well, I figured out that not all job offers are available if you just Google job offers Netherlands mathematics, for instance. That is not where you will find all the offers. They are often just on the side of the company itself. So yeah, I was like, okay, I want to work at a kind of big-ish company / government institution. So I'll just look for those, see whose goals or whose, I don't know, way of working, feels right to me, and then apply to those. So feel like both for, will I feel confident working at this company? Will I feel at home, so to say? And looking at like the goals of the company. So both the atmosphere, but also, what does this company put forward? That is the way that I went about it. And also sometimes friends would say like, oh, I've heard here and here there's this availability, or oh, I know a friend of a friend who applied for this. Maybe that also suits you. So I hope that is helpful.
So Marit and Josselin, you've both mentioned that you started doing with an apprenticeship. Is this the standard way of starting at a company, you think?
Well, it's becoming more standard. So I know that when I did applications, like way back when I started, I also applied to some companies directly, and I didn't really easily get in. So it was easier to start a traineeship. And I think nowadays it's even easier to get into a traineeship, and it's harder to get to the actual company directly. And even companies have their own traineeships. So maybe you do know that you want to work for a certain company, then they will provide you with a traineeship to determine which kind of function would fit you best. And I think that's a good cause. So I really like that you have more options, and I think that companies make a good choice in doing that, because that will bind people to them more than just starting them in one position which you're not sure of if they will fit you in the end or for the long run. So I think it's more of a now thing. So if maybe 10, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. I think it's a hot topic to do a traineeship.
I agree. When I looked at companies like, okay, do they have any starting roles? There were not that many. Most of the time, they would require like 3 to 5 years of experience. And I was like, well, I don't have it. And on the internet, people always say, oh, you should apply anyways, even if you don't have the qualifications and blah, blah, blah. Like, don't give up. And then I would apply and they would say back, oh, yeah, we have enough applicants and you don't have enough experience. We will not invite you for an interview, which I'm like, fair. Yeah, it's the person you're looking for the role, but that does make it hard to start out on the job market, I think. So I sent out a lot of applications, got a lot of rejections, and that is unfortunately just the way it is. And then traineeships are ways where it's accepted that you have zero experience. So I agree that I feel like some companies are moving more towards, okay, we're doing a traineeship, but then there are also less junior roles within the company to apply to. So that if you want to work at the company, you kind of have to do the traineeship. Not all companies, but I don't know what the job market would look like 10 years ago, but I would not be surprised if that is the trend. Yeah.
And you both mentioned also the word of mouth, right? You said, Marit, sometimes you hear from friends that there is an opening. And I think, Josselin, if I remember correctly, you said that you started into an actually position was because one of your fellow students also was doing that and somehow told you that there was this possibility of getting the traineeship, right?
Yeah, it was actually someone talked about a traineeship from the study association. They let someone come in to discuss what they were doing, and that really got me. And that combined with someone that I knew from a former board member that was actually working there, so it was a combination of those things. Yeah, word of mouth is very important. If you know someone is happy at a job, then it's much more convincing than just reading a text and doing an application.
And after you have been accepted or invited for an interview, then let me ask you also another question that is probably even more alien to many of our students. How do you prepare for such an interview? What was the expectation? What did you expect from those interviews, right? You go there, you have no clue what's going to happen, but somehow they want to see if you're a good fit and you want to see if they are a good fit for you, I would say. Do you have some tips, strategies, ideas, especially now that you're also on the other side of the table? Josselin?
So it's not really that you don't know what's going to happen, because they're always going to ask you to tell you something about yourself. So it's good to have maybe not a studied in version of who are you, but to have a few pointers for yourself that you want to address when they ask you who are you. And I would always prepare with a little knowledge on what the company does and what they're famous for, what you like about them, and then combine that with what you like about the function. And also, if you have any insecurities about whether you're good enough fit, to just ask. And what I also learned during the traineeship, I also had to interview for all the projects that I would be doing. So I have interviewed, I think, more than 30, 40 times, just over the span of my working life so far. And it's very good to always, at the end of the interview, ask how did they feel about the conversation. If there are any feedback that you can get from how you did the interview, because for one, you can learn something about yourself and how you presented yourself in the interview, but also if there's maybe some feedback that you can take away from it that can help you in the next interview if you don't actually get the position. So that's a really good tip that I would give anyone that has to do interviews. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, they're really good. I think Josselin made some really good points. I think I would like to add one other. Often in interviews, like first of all, practice talking to a camera. A lot of the first round interviews I had were online. So try to maybe record yourself once or twice, exactly like introducing yourself, as Josselin said, and see, okay, how do I come across on camera? Because it's different than real life. And then maybe also a lot of questions that I got asked during interviews were like very like skill-based questions, but then more like, oh, do you have maybe an example of a situation where things did not go the way you wanted? And like, how did you react to it? Like stuff like that. So try to think beforehand of some situations that you came across during your studies or during your life. Like it does not necessarily need to be during your job. It can be, oh, well, I once had a quarrel with a stranger on the street. I don't know. It can be something very weird. But to think of situations that show that you, that you have certain capabilities that they're looking for, and or at least try that for yourself. And also practice with selling yourself. I found it very awkward and I felt a bit uneasy at first having to sell myself, like saying, oh, I'm really good at this, or this is something that I really do well. Because it's weird to say that about yourself, I feel like. But it is something like you don't have to say it about everything, but I think every person has a few things that they're really good of, and you can be proud of that. And try to practice with yourself saying that you're good at it, because it shows confidence. It gives you a good feeling during the interview, and it tells the recruiters that these are the skills that you're really good at. So that's because for me it was at first it was a bit awkward. I was like, okay, what do I say that I'm good at? Maybe that's, I think.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
I would also write some questions I had to them beforehand, because it's also always a good impression to have questions to them and not them just only asking questions to you, which happens in a lot of interviews. So I would suggest you do that as well beforehand.
And then that would also be an opportunity for you to ask about the company, right? Because Marcello mentioned, okay, how do you find out if a company is a good fit? So if it's really important for you that you can, I don't know, work from home, or that the team is at the office a lot of the time, that's the point, I think, where you can ask that sort of questions, right?
Yeah, I think that's very important, because it's not only them getting to know you, it's also you getting to know them. And that's just a bigger part of an interview as it is. Yeah. It works two ways.
That would also be very important for a PhD or a postdoc interview, right?
Yes.
The impression you get from a candidate that is curious and inquisitive about the way the team works, the way the project will go on, the kind of additional opportunities besides just research. It just makes you look so much more interested in what is going on.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that. Like, I've never done an interview for a PhD position, but I can imagine that you've taken a lot of those interviews. That makes sense.
This is, by the way, super relevant for me because I'll be applying soon next year. And so I'm also wondering, because you hear sometimes that they will ask you about your pitfalls, and some people will tell them, well, I'm just very perfectionistic, I'm too eager, or whatever. What is the best approach to this? Do you just need to be very honest or not too much?
You can be honest, but it would help what Marit also said, like give a situation in which it was an actual pitfall for you, and how did you solve that situation? Because then you would already show that what you're not so good at can also be something you work on actively, and also giving ideas on how you can work on that and progress on that more within the interview is a really good point for you to do that.
I agree. Yeah.
Good answer, I think.
I'm curious about, you mentioned learning to sell yourself. Now, this is very hard because we are usually very critical with ourselves. So it's just a shift of mindset. But I'm really curious to know if there is any skill that you actually got from your study periods that you never expected would be an actual skill that is useful to find a job. Like looking back, I think you hardly would go and say, I am very good and I don't know, computing something on elliptic curves or solving dynamical systems. I mean, it depends on the job. Like if you're doing a modeling job, maybe that's what you want to say. But I would say for most of the job, that's not what you would go and say. But are there other skills that, in fact, you have acquired, but you never realized you did until the moment this came up?
Yeah, I think there are a few, actually. So you said already, like the analytics part of doing this study, that helps a lot. But I also think that learning fast, like learning maybe things that are a little bit easier than mathematics, you can learn them very fast. And that's something that I have multiple times actually referred to in an interview. Like, if you want me to learn something new, I can do that within a short period of time. So I really liked that part of what I learned in the studies. And I wouldn't have thought that would be relevant at all while I was studying.
And I would like to add to that maybe more, how do you say it? Like determination and I don't know how to
Maybe
word this right.
persistency or
Yeah, like exactly. Pushing through and not stopping until you find the answer or until you have been able to finish something. I think studying mathematics requires a lot of internal motivation to, more than other subjects, to finish your studies. Like it's not an easy study. It requires a lot of you mentally in that aspect. And I think that that is a soft skill that a lot of people might oversee from themselves once they've finished their studies. That it's not easy to follow these courses where you get stuck each and every time, because that is the point of mathematics. You get stuck, you have to find your way how to get out of it, and then you continue to the next problem that you're gonna be stuck at, and still you keep going. So yeah, like that's the way it goes, right?
that's how it works. Yeah.
So like
Me-
exactly like as you said, like persistency and not giving up and staying motivated to get to the result that you want, they are things that I feel are very specific to mathematics.
I agree.
You almost make mathematicians sound like animals that get stuck at the same corner every time. But no, I understand what you mean.
No, a different corner each time. Like
Yes,
Yeah,
oh, that's
different
true.
score. Yeah.
But if you don't write it down, it might happen that you're stuck at the
yes,
same corner every
definitely.
couple of weeks.
Yes.
So suppose you've had a great interview, no negative feedback, and they want to hire you. How do you go about discussing your salary, working conditions, and things like this?
So what I found is that a lot of people that I know, so friends, colleagues, have a really hard time discussing salary. Usually they ask for your salary strip from your last job, if you had any, and then they will just maybe up it with a few €100 if you're lucky, and that's it. And I would really like to give you the advice to don't sell yourself short and to really research what you're worth within the market for your education and your skills and your knowledge, and to not be afraid to ask for more. I think that really helped me get where I am now. And I know some people that have followed a similar trajectory that I had that are making a lot less money just because they never asked, or they just accepted what was given, and instead of just asking for some more. And don't be afraid to ask too much, because they will tell you when you've asked too much, and you will come out somewhere between their offer and yours. And there is room for discussion. There's also room for discussion of more holidays, or maybe you want a lease car with it or something like that. Don't be afraid to ask. No is always given if you don't ask. So I would really motivate you to try, and yeah, don't sell yourself short.
Can I ask what kind of reactions did you get when you talked to your to the person when you were discussing your salary, like actually want to have more than this? Was
So
it
that's really
like, oh, you're Josselin, no, this is it?
yeah. Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
When you're starting a traineeship, usually the answer is, well, this is just bounded by our CEO, and there's nothing we can change with this salary. So then you just have to deal with it. But if you're working just directly at a company or you're switching jobs, then it's a lot easier. So yeah, usually they call you. And on the call, you can do an offer from your end, or maybe they email you, and then you can respond to that via telephone. And I would just ask a specific number. And then usually the answer is, I would have to rediscuss. So they will take some time, maybe a day, and then they would come back to me saying, well, this is what we can do. And then I would usually agree with that number. So there would only be one discussion moment, but if you don't agree yet, still you can do it another time. But I find that a bit, you don't want to push them too much.
No, because you'll have to work with them in the future, of course. You will have to work with them.
Yeah, you still have to have a connection with them. And you don't want to butt heads at that moment already because you have to still start. And in my last job switch, I actually couldn't get any more because I was already making too much money for the job that I wanted to do. So that was a different situation. And I've also heard of people that applied for my former function and they asked too much money. And that was actually the reason that they didn't hire them. So they couldn't get out of this discussion on how much money he should get for the function that was given. And I think that's like what I just said. So maybe you give one counter offer and then you let them discuss that and then you agree with what they come with next. But don't go in, try to get everything out of it just because, like you said, Anand, it's also directly your communication and in your relationship with this person, this recruiter or the manager, whatever, whoever you're dealing with. You don't want to burn your bridges before you're even there. So it's a fine line between giving yourself enough credit and not burning any bridges in the meantime.
Thank you.
And
Very
it can be
important.
scary.
I would say that sometimes you can also say, okay, maybe this is the salary I ask, I get an in between, but I could get a few more holidays or I could get relocation costs. Like there are many additional benefits that might be worth the lease car from the company, so you only have to pay the taxes. There are so many benefits that could effectively increase your salary by decreasing your expenses.
Yeah. Or maybe you will work a little less for the same amount of money. There's a lot of options. So be aware for yourself what's important to you. Do you want more time for yourself or do you want to work more and gain more? That's up to you what you want. Yeah, there's a lot of options.
Thank you for these beautiful answers and for agreeing to come to the podcast or appear as a guest in the podcast, I guess. And I'll thank the listeners too for listening to this podcast. Please leave a comment if you have any suggestions for future podcasts. And for now, see you until the next.
And if you like the episode, please share it on your social media.